have several different editions of the Public Square, and recently on our weekend long-form program, our team was joined by Dr. William B. Allen to discuss the recent political conventions, and we thought today might be good to continue that conversation. You can always listen to the first part online at thepublicsquare.com. Here's Dave Zanotti.
We're still trying to debrief on what happened at the political conventions. It's almost now, it's like, are you kidding me? Who wants to go back and look at that? We're looking at the numbers of viewers. It's not, these conventions did not, I don't know. I don't know how they match up with the Little League World Series. I know I was paying a lot more attention to the Little League World Series than I was to the conventions, and I have to do this for a living. So I was paying attention to the conventions.
Well, they're so late at night. Some of them, some of the big name speeches they put late at night, at least on the east side.
Help me. And this is Republicans and Democrats alike. How in the world do you run a convention in Central Time, leaving east of the Mississippi completely out of the equation? And last time I checked, those people vote too. I mean, I don't understand who could stay up that late on four nights in a row.
I go to bed about 9. I'm tired.
These things put you to sleep anyhow. How in the world? I mean, there's not enough caffeine on the continent to be able to muscle up to this stuff. So that part's very confusing to me. And so the question becomes, were they really just talking to people in the room? And speaking of people in the room, these are two very distinctly different crowds. We recognize that. This is the base of both parties. And so does anyone stop to ask, well, who's in the room and how do you get there? How do you become a delegate to come to a national convention? You have to get elected, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you had to pay a lot of money. I thought maybe that was it.
That
Or
helps.
you can be appointed.
And I'm being facetious because
No, that's
actually
exactly
you do
true.
have to pay a lot of money.
Yeah, but that's even before you get there. No, the big money players.
In some states, you can be appointed, and the Democrats, of course, have what they call superdelegates, which are not elected.
Who pay a lot more money,
So
right?
there were
It's just-
at the DNC, there were
It's
superdelegates
just
in the
because
room.
we like you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's a process that varies from state to state.
You get elected
But
at the
it's-
county level, or you get elected at the precinct level.
It varies from state to state.
Okay.
I just keep saying that.
So the people that are there are committed to the political parties. Okay, so that's a first basis. Now that means they're a minority. They're a minority of a minority.
Right. You won't find any independent voters in the room.
Right.
No.
And so since the majority of people who vote in this country are not committed to the political parties anywhere near that level, you have this is for the serious players. Now, this brings up a question of relevance. Since most people do not consider the political parties worthy of investment, I'm not saying they're right, wrong, or indifferent in their attitude, but they do not consider the political parties worthy of a point of commitment. Yet the political parties determine who the nominees for the presidency will be, by and large. And that's a system that we've all grown. Now, I know that it's not hardwired that way in law. RFK Jr. attempted to break through and found that the opposition of the Democrat Party was too great for him to get through. And the cost, even with having billionaires in his pocket, was too great. It was too difficult for a campaign for the presidency.
He was being sued.
And again, that's because the rules are different in every state.
Right.
He had to face stringent, and they change from one election cycle to the next.
Yeah, if they
so
like
it's a
you.
moving target for independent third-party candidates.
But George Wallace managed to do it twice and have a significant impact on an election. Ross Perot had a huge impact on an election.
Different world.
Different world, different rules.
Different media.
Very true, different media, different culture in 1968 and 72. But also then after a while, parties say, you know what, we're just not going to let that happen again. Look at what they did to Bernie Sanders in 2016.
And that was superdelegates,
They
right?
truly rigged it against Bernie.
Okay, so what we have is I actually hear crickets because it's sort of like everyone knows this.
Mm-hmm.
That's out in the real working world, in the realm of reality. Everybody knows. 99% of the people know that this is a wasted time endeavor.
It's a show.
That it's a show. And so they don't invest themselves into this. They don't care about this as much as they do their kids' soccer clubs. They certainly don't care as much as they do about their church or their synagogue or their NFL teams. They don't care about this at any level of committed time, energy, money, prayer. They don't.
Is anybody watching one of these conventions and it's changing their vote in real time? I think
That's interesting.
Part of the reason you don't care is because you kind of know what you're going to do.
Okay.
It's just to rally the troops. That's all they are.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's a base building, troop rallying sort of thing. So it's for, if you will, the 1% of the political class, if you will, that actually carries out the responsibilities of leadership. Okay, so there's a tremendous estrangement in regards to the process and the people. That's a fundamental process that exists on both parties. People are disenfranchised. Now, there are going to be some people who are going to call us up and say, and write us and say, and if you people would just make your singular commitment to invest yourself in the Republican Party, it would be so much better and it would win and prevail and everything would change and it would all be better. Now, I've heard that argument multiple times over the last 45 years, and I've watched people take that line of logic, make a complete total investment of their lives, and slam themselves into a brick wall. Now, there's a fundamental reason for that. And that's because politics is something that is the end stop on the train, if you will. The political parties and the processing of the political parties and moving through this process is the result of a cultural worldview and of family life and development and of civil interests and concerns. Politics isn't the beginning of all reality. Politics comes downstream. So when people make their absolute commitment to parties and believing that the parties will change everything else, that's not a complete answer. Politics are a part of the answer, and political parties are a part of the answer. But there is truth and individual. There's steps to an ordered life, to civilization. We like to say there's steps. It starts with identity. You have to know who you are, where you came from. Mm-hmm. So the creator is the first step, right from the beginning, right from the Declaration of Independence. Right. So then if you're going to climb up those stairs, you have to do it in the construct. And the first construct is family. It's not political party. It's not even church. It's family before it's church.
God created family before he created government. So you look at the institutions that God created in his revelation in the book of Genesis. He creates family first. Then he creates a lot of theologians would say the church, the body, the organism of believers worshiping together, fellowshipping together. And lastly, he creates human government. And we need to keep it in that order.
And before you can create human government, you have to settle on the step of liberty or not. Mm-hmm. All right. So if I've got identity right, I've got family right, I've got liberty right, then I've got the potential of lifestyle. Now, I'd like to make that last step prosperity. Because if you want to reach prosperity, you have the other three steps right. Mm-hmm. But in the midst of all that, if you don't have a political frame in which to hold the picture on the wall, you can't get there either. So all of this fits together in an orderly process. And we're in the worst of all times in America. The worst of all times is this: at the ending of a 4-year political cycle, at a highly contested and now, if you will, open seat presidential election. Mm-hmm. An open seat presidential. That is the worst of the worst, because that's where all of what we are is mashed down into this strainer and smushed as hard and pounded down, as if to say all of our reality is determined by who gets elected to the presidency. That is bizarre. That is nothing that we were ever designed to be by our Creator or by the people who put together this country. It's not the way the Declaration of Independence reads. It's not the Constitution. It's not the practice. But we make ourselves sick. We literally make ourselves sick every 4 years. And right now, people are sick. They're sick and tired of all of it. They come off of the conventions, and it's like, it's a terrible, it's worse than a sugar high. I mean, it's like a binge. It's like a drug type experience. And they come out of this, it's like, holy moly, oh my gosh. It's just, whoa.
So if you don't get what you want in an election, are you the same person the day after the election?
What a great question.
Are you the same person?
What a great
Make up
question.
your mind now how you are going to be the day after The election,
I don't
any
even
election.
I don't mean to be contentious. I'm not sure that's something you just make up your mind now. I mean, it's like
You
it's
should
like
have
a
been
football
made-
team. Yeah,
You should have made it up a long time ago.
You play like you practice.
You're going to fight like you train. Yeah.
Even better, you fight like
And-
you train.
and every day
if your
is training.
identity is determined based on these external
Yep.
political things, you got a big problem. All right.
That's what I'm saying. You better make up your mind now.
Yeah.
Because the day will come. Are you going to fall apart the next day because
we
you
see-
didn't get what you wanted? Oh,
we
the
see
world's
people
come to an end.
falling apart on both sides.
Quit whining.
We got Christians and self-confessed
Oh, yeah.
pagans losing their minds on both sides of the equation.
I had some people standing next to me at a political rally many years ago. And I said, well, what if so-and-so doesn't win? And the woman said to me, oh, God would not allow that. And I said, oh, you're telling God what he's going to allow and not allow.
So I want to say something on behalf of the people who you were describing as whiners.
Yeah.
There is a perspective.
Wait, who said that?
I did. I
Oh,
said
you
there
call
are
them whiners?
people
Okay.
who are whiners
Okay,
and
all
are
right,
on
good,
just
good.
both
Jumping off
sides
that
of the
point.
aisle.
Okay, all right.
There is a very real perspective that even though government falls third in this hierarchy,
Mhm.
that decisions that are made by government officials affect the other two in
Well,
the
sure.
hierarchy.
Of course they
Of
do.
course they do.
So that's what people get worried about. How will it affect my family? How will it affect the way we live our lives? How will it
Legitimate
affect the way
concerns.
we have freedoms and our liberties?
Mhm.
So they're concerned, but we have to constantly remind ourselves that God's sovereignty is not juxtapositioned on with the outcome of any political season.
Right on.
Okay, I'm sorry. I disagree with this entire process.
Okay.
First off, I didn't realize we were calling people whiners.
I did.
So, okay, you did. So I apologize
me.
to whoever might be offended by being called a whiner. And that comes from someone who's quite competent in the art of whining. All right. I also challenged the whole concept of how we offload the issue of God's sovereignty, because it's so often heard by people as God's still on the throne, God's still in control, I've read the end of the book, and we win. God's sovereignty
Cliches.
is not a cliche.
No, and it's also not, he's not a vending machine where we can just expect him to have an outcome that we would expect.
And
that we like.
He's not surprised by the reality that the decisions that we make politically have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
However, he also lets us make those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Along that line, I read something that shocked me the other day. We all talk about, and we've studied, and I've been doing a lot of study on the end of the Soviet Empire and the collapse of the Soviet Union and the role that was played at the end of this conflict with Margaret Thatcher and President Reagan and Pope John Paul II, and how that group of people had such a dynamic, amazing role in all of this. But in a book that he wrote called The Threshold of Hope, John Paul II said that you could say that God's providence caused the collapse of the Soviet Union, that it was a part of his plan. He said that could be said, and a case can be made. Now, then this is the guy who was one of the three key players at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also tell you that the Soviet Union fell of its own weight. It was the sin inherent in that system, that the failed mechanisms that could never succeed in a created order made by a living God. It fell of its own weight.
Never let anyone forget that the day they hauled down the flag of the murderous Soviet Union over the Kremlin was December 25th, 1991. And I don't believe that was an accident.
So my point is, as it comes to the question of providence is often bigger than we see it. And here's the guy who was intimately involved, right? The three key players. Some people say that his role, once he became a priest, made him the most influential individual in the 20th century in regards to changing the world. He says, yeah, well, yeah, but First off, God was doing it. And secondly, it was going to fall anyways. It couldn't survive. In other words, underplaying his own role, but also speaking more significantly of the power of providence in the sense that God's providence is not even capable. We're not even capable of understanding the depth of his concern for what happens on this earth and how he will do what he will do, whether we see it, understand it, or comprehend it or not.
Amen.
But Dave, isn't that why it's so important for us to really remember that relationships between us and God are individual and personal? That a relationship, my trust, my individual trust of a sovereign God is not dependent on a nation rising or falling, or what the outcome of a cultural shift is. I have a personal responsibility to engage. We're supposed to be salt and light, but I don't have to put myself into a position where I'm doubting God's sovereignty or I'm doubting who I am in him because of a broader cultural outcome.
Yes, I would certainly say, of course, that makes sense. And it also points up the difficulty that we have because as a outreach in the realm of media and public policy, as a mission to America that we are grateful to serve upon, we often are in the position where it's easy to take up the role of giving advice. And I think that in most instances, I've watched our team do that with the most sincerest of intentions. But it is difficult to understand where people are coming from if your relationship with them is one-dimensional, if we don't know their life story. And we're talking, and there are responses, and then we end up bouncing off of each other. This is some of the holiest and most sacred conversation you can have when you talk about the sovereignty of God and God's will for this generation and the generations to come, and what role do we have to play in it? This is the stuff of life, and we need to be so careful, because we speak in cliches. We don't mean to, but we do. People hear in cliches. People hear in context of their comfort zones. And it's a very difficult process. This is, when you're talking about reality therapy, this is what we're talking about here. What is biblical reality versus what we perceive reality to be? And you know what? We don't always get it right.
And everything you just said should help us have more grace towards those who disagree with us.
Who are on a journey?
I'm thinking of divergent views within one family.
Sure.
You come from the same family tree. At some point, there was the same perspective, maybe a Judeo-Christian perspective in the family, and then divergent branches come out from that. And then all of a sudden, people are at each other's throats, or I don't understand you, I can't talk to you. It's so heartbreaking to see that happen when all we have to do is remember we need to listen, we need to have grace, we need to speak truth in love. Simple formula.
Well, this all takes us to the conversation of the political conventions, because the first one came and left, and now the second one has come and left, but now we're into the campaign. And it's interesting because we have seen the power of the rhetoric, particularly of the Democrat convention. And we have people telling us, I think in some of these family situations and others, that what they heard was one of the most beautiful, patriotic expressions of love for America and freedom and joy. And they are exhilarated to be behind the Democrat campaign this year and all that entails across all the multiple races, because they believe that races for office, because they believe that this is a truly redemptive American story.
And people for the Republican Party are saying the same thing. Hooray, hooray, hooray.
And yet there couldn't be a greater separation. So this brings us to the question of who's doing the storytelling and how effective are the storytellers, and are the stories true? Are the stories true? That's where things get difficult because people hear what they want to hear.
That's why I would encourage every person. Again, we're giving advice. Sorry, but what I try to do is think back to living under the administration of Donald Trump and think back to living under the administration of Joe Biden. That's the interesting thing about this. It's an open seat, but yet you've lived.
Got two incumbents.
But yet you got two incumbents. Obviously, again, Joe Biden is not on the ticket, but kind of that worldview is. And it doesn't mean that Donald Trump will be exactly the same if he gets elected again. But I think generally, broadly, just think about what life was like. And you can read news stories from those time periods. You can look at policies that were passed.
Heavens, Alan, are we suggesting that our memories are so bad that we can't remember what happened 5 years ago?
Yes.
Or 6 years ago?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that the memories are bad, but you have to try. You have to actively remember. And it's a muscle almost to exercise. So
wait a minute, are you suggesting that the
out,
storytelling is so powerful in this current campaign that it's actually blocking us from reality?
I am suggesting that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we were recently looking at a news article from where the AP, quote unquote, journalist, his title at the Associated Press is Director of News Storytelling and Newsroom Innovation. That's a mouthful, but that really adds a lot of context to all the stories that come out.
You have to be really careful the way you articulate that. New storytelling.
Oh, not news storytelling.
Correct. Right. Did I say that wrong? He is the Director of New Storytelling and Newsroom Innovation at the Associated Press. That is his official title.
Those are two separate words.
Storytelling time, children.
Yes. The Associated
I love story
Press.
time, but why is it a news story? Yes. What makes it new?
A nonprofit organization that existed originally to the facts and nothing but the facts, over-the-wire services and this is since the 1800s, is now basically has someone in charge of new storytelling.
So they begin their articles with "Once upon a time."
That's too old, Jeff.
That's too old, Jeff. No, that's antiquated.
Okay.
I think the title should be Director of Wrapping Paper and not what's inside the box.
Okay.
How about Minister of Propaganda? That works.
There you
right?
go.
Along that line, we have programming that's coming that we want to let everyone know about because we took the net of our experiences with the Republican convention and the Democrat convention, and needless to say, we've had some real headbanging sessions together as a staff. And this particular reveal by the Associated Press, this story, which they ran recently, talking about that what's really happening now is a competition between the storytellers. That the Democrats have a story about America, the Republicans have a story about America, and they're trying to sell you their story about America. Okay, at that stage in the game, I don't know how this is going to sound.
Click.
You're just driving your van right across our front lawn and through our front door because we've been about the accurate telling of the American story for 45 years. That really, truly matters to us. Now you're on our front lawn, on the mission that we believe we've been assigned to do. And so we're going to have some pretty serious questions about that. Now, we're not suggesting these people don't have the right to do it. What we're asking is, what is the basis upon which they are telling their story, and is their story true? That's the challenge on the part of all of these parties and all of these storytellers. And now the Associated Press is coming and saying, well, they're in the narrative storytelling business as well. So the bottom line is, I got to be really careful here because some of my heritage could come out on some of the conversation. I mean, I feel like my uncles are coming out from the grave in World War II because they have strong words about this stuff.
What genre of storytelling is this? I feel like it's maybe fiction.
I mean, 1984 comes through, but here's an interesting point, and we're going to be talking to Dr. Allen. We want everyone to be paying attention as those broadcasts are released. Let's remember something. C.S. Lewis did a book Remember it, That Hideous Strength?
Oh, yeah.
Such a powerful book. Francis Schaeffer said every American should read that book.
Oof.
It was about a technocracy taking over a free society and turning everyone into, in essence, their slaves. It turned into a very fascinating sci-fi dystopian piece. I will tell you, in the end, the good guys win, but you got to read a lot of pages, and it is very chilling and compelling. The lead character in that story was a journalist who was hired by the technocracy to tell the story.
And if you haven't read it, I think we were just given a homework assignment here on the Public Square. Hey, thanks for listening today, and thanks for your support of the American Policy Roundtable and the Public Square here and online at thepublicsquare.com and with our smartphone app as well, free in your app store.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.